Today we're going to talk about how so many members of the media are falling one by one into Trump's grasp, and I interview Pod Save America's Jon Favreau about Trump backtracking on his biggest campaign promise and whether political gravity for Trump still exists. And I'm joined by the newly elected North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs to discuss Republicans' efforts to undo her win in the November election. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. You might have caught this clip from Donald Trump just a few days back.
But the media's tamed down a little bit. They're liking us much better now, I think. If they don't, we'll have to just take them on again, and we don't want to do that.
The media is tamed down a little bit. They're liking us much better now, I think. If they don't, then we'll just have to take them on again, and we don't want to do that. Usually, Trump is full of shit. He's not here. Here he is telling the truth, because what we've seen from so much of legacy media in the last few weeks has been as swift as it is disappointing. You've heard the phrase obeying in advance. They are putting on a clinic and doing exactly that. Now, it started when Jeff Bezos blocked the Washington Post from endorsing Kamala Harris over Donald Trump ahead of the election. The LA Times billionaire owner did the same thing. Then after the election, Joe and Mika from MSNBC's Morning Joe announced that they'd gone down to Mar-a-Lago for some FaceTime with the president-elect. CNN's made Trump appendage Scott Jennings the face of their network. Zuckerberg then donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, which was followed shortly thereafter by Amazon doing the same thing. And of course, the New York Times has trafficked so deeply in both sidesism over the last few years that it's basically become a parody of itself. Then this weekend, news broke that ABC News and George Stephanopoulos reached a settlement with Trump in his defamation suit against the host, wherein ABC is paying $15 million to Trump's presidential foundation. That suit was brought over Stephanopoulos saying that a jury found that Trump had raped E. Jean Carroll. Now, that's just slightly off. The jury found that Trump was liable for sexual abuse, but it's worth noting here that the judge in this case concluded that the claim that Donald Trump raped Carroll was, quote, substantially true. Judge Lewis Kaplan, who was presiding over this case, wrote, quote, the finding that Ms. Carroll failed to prove that she was raped within the meaning of the New York penal law does not mean that she failed to prove that Mr. Trump raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape, adding, indeed, as the evidence at trial recounted below makes clear, the jury found that Mr. Trump in fact did exactly that. So here's the thing about a defamation case against a public figure, which George Stephanopoulos is. Donald Trump would have had to prove actual malice. That's the bar, meaning that Stephanopoulos knew that the statement was false or acted with reckless regard for the truth. Stephanopoulos saying that the jury found him liable for rape is a distinction without much of a difference here in terms of what the judge presiding over the case wrote, and certainly not what anybody would consider reckless or with malice. There's also the fact that Trump would have had to prove damages, meaning prove that Stephanopoulos' comments caused Trump reputational harm and caused him financial hardship, and that money needs to be repaid to restore what he lost, whether from lost business or emotional distress, for example. Does anybody think that George Stephanopoulos actually caused Trump financial or reputational harm? Is there some massive subset of ABC News' Sunday morning audience that suddenly swung away from Donald Trump? Did Trump lose his ability to raise money? Like, the notion that Trump suffered damages here is a joke. In other words, Trump would have had a miserable time trying to prove that Stephanopoulos intended him harm, and Trump would have had a miserable time trying to prove that he suffered as the result of it. But still, that didn't stop ABC News from settling for $15 million, which raises the question, why? Why did they do it? So there's actually two reasons why I would presume that they do it. First, they get the benefit of being able to donate $15 million to a guy who very much is expecting everybody to pay their way back into his good graces. Bezos did it, Zuckerberg did it, Donald Trump expects the money. And second, they get the benefit that their payment still has an air of plausible deniability. This wasn't just us giving cash to Donald Trump. No, definitely not that. This is money that we were forced to give him because of this defamation case that we definitely wouldn't have been able to win. See, they get to have their cake and eat it too. And their gift to Trump isn't just $1 million like Bezos or Zuckerberg. They gave a cool $15 million. All under the guise of being forced to pay him because of a defamation case that was effectively unwinnable for Trump had they brought this thing further in the legal process. All of which is to say, these hosts and these outlets are falling over themselves to curry favor with Donald Trump, whether by kissing the ring in person in the buffet line at Mar-a-Lago or by just writing him hefty checks. They are making absolute sure that he knows he's got them. I know that the Washington Post motto has become a punching bag as of late, but it really is something that the first instant democracy dies in darkness was challenged, these people all rolled over for Trump and gave him exactly what he wanted. Democracy, in fact, is perfectly capable of dying in broad daylight, thanks to these very people. So look, not to get too meta here, but as we head toward the Trump administration, a second Trump term, this is yet another reason why it is so important for big D Democrats and little d democracy to bolster left-wing independent media. The reality is that the left has relied forever on legacy media to act as its spokespeople and, more recently, to protect democracy. They are broadcasting that they are not willing to do that. Why? Because they are businesses that are beholden to some billionaire higher up the food chain who doesn't want to ruffle any feathers with Donald Trump. The democracy dies in darkness stuff is all well and good, but apparently integrity doesn't pay as well as favor with Trump does. So if the Democrats want any hope of succeeding in the future, they have got to embrace a media ecosystem that doesn't put currying favor with a despot over fighting back against one. Next up are previews of my interviews with Jon Favreau and Allison Riggs, but first, just a quick note, what you're watching right now is my once-weekly video podcast called No Lie. There's also an audio podcast called No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. The audio podcast is now part of the Crooked Media Network, which is great for me because Pod Save America, which is part of Crooked Media, has always been a huge inspiration for me. Now, with the show joining the Crooked Media Network, there are ads that play on the audio version of this podcast that will also play on the video version of this podcast, meaning once a week, one video per week, we will have sponsors on this channel. So without any more delay, you're going to see a quick word from our sponsors and then previews my interviews with Jon Favreau and Allison Riggs. No Lie is brought to you by Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. Here's how it works. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. I don't really talk about my life before politics, but I was a personal trainer for about 10 years. Your metabolic health plays a massive role in getting fit and staying fit, and Lumen gives you recommendations to improve exactly that. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go to lumen.me/BTC to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/BTC for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. No Lie is brought to you by ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. If politics didn't already make me feel old enough, there is also the fact that when I drink, I do not bounce back the next day like I used to, until I found pre-alcohol. So here's the deal. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. The reality is that when I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can still get in front of the camera without worry, and that's legitimately not something I'd been able to do before. So look, the holiday season's upon us. We're going to be consuming a bit more alcohol than usual. Pre-alcohol helps you stay on track and not let the season throw you off course. Go to zbiotics.com/BTC to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use BTC at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/BTC and use the code BTC at checkout for 15% off. I want to start off with some news that we have as far as Donald Trump is concerned. He ran this whole campaign predicated on this idea that he was going to be the guy to bring prices down. Obviously, inflation plagued not just Democrats in this country, but incumbent governments across the entire world. While he was speaking with Time Magazine, he said that it will be hard to bring down grocery prices. So does it feel like after this whole campaign of telling his supporters one thing that he kind of pulled the wool over their eyes here?
I think that it's going to be important for Democrats to sort of watch what happens here and tell a story about what's happening with Donald Trump and how he is betraying his promise to anyone who voted for him. So he gets Time Person of the Year. He sits down for this Time interview. He talks about how grocery prices may not, it's tough to get prices down. I'm going to try, but it's tough to get them down once they're up. And the day it comes out, he goes to the stock exchange, rings the bell. The CEO of Time Magazine is next to him, chanting USA with him for some weird reason. And then he tells everyone on Wall Street, we're going to get your corporate taxes down. I got them down from 35% to 20%, 21%. And now I'm going to try to get corporate taxes down from 21% to 15%. This is like the top 10 richest companies, most profitable companies in the country would get like $25 billion tax cut. They've been more profitable than ever. 5 largest grocery stores that have been profitable, they'd get a couple $1 billion tax cut. Think they're going to pass that on to the people who are shopping and worried that they can't afford their groceries and have been for several years now? I don't know.
But I mean, he was so certain when he's making these promises to the corporate CEOs. But I mean, is there going to be some sense among his base? Do you think there's going to be some sense among his base that, okay, what he promised them, that he's more reticent to be able to deliver now, even though he's very bullish on the idea that he's going to be able to bring the corporate tax rate down?
I think his base is, who knows what they're going to think.
Yeah.
But I think the people we need to focus on are voters who maybe they voted for Biden in 2020 and then they switched to Trump. Maybe they're new Trump voters. Maybe they hadn't voted for him before. They're not necessarily Trump fans. Some of them actually don't like Trump. Some of them just had a gauzy memory of his presidency and liked that things felt cheaper when he was president. So 4 years go by and they don't see prices down. 2 years go by, forget 4 years, get to the midterms. 2 years go by and they look at the Republican Congress and the Republican president that they elected, and they see that they passed a huge tax cut that sent billions of dollars to companies that are hugely profitable and have jacked up prices over the last several years, but they don't see any relief. And they're still struggling with costs, whether it's groceries, whether it's housing, whether it's cars, then yeah, I think when you get to 2026, you get to the midterms, people are going to be pretty pissed. And then, if you go another 4 years, then, when there's an open primary on the Republican side and the Democratic side, then yeah, I think voters will be pissed that the Republican control that they voted for in Washington didn't do shit to make their lives easier.
This race isn't as cut and dry as it seems. Now the Republicans are trying to block your ascent onto the Supreme Court here. They're challenging over 60,000 votes in a race that you won by just a few hundred here. Can you give a state of the race as it stands right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I want folks to understand that what the post-election processes recounts have shown is that I did win this race. I won by 734 votes, which out of 5.6 million is a small margin. North Carolina is a very hotly contested state. But not only did I win by 734, the first machine recount produced the exact same margin, 734 out of 5.6 million votes cast. So the machine recount is done. It has confirmed our win in our margin. And we are about 98% done with the hand recount sample, which again is just confirming the incredible accuracy and diligence of our election officials in North Carolina, that it is working as intended and that I did win this race. And what is not, recounts are great. Normal post-election processes inspire confidence. Right. Post-election protests that challenge the validity of our elections and the validity of tens of thousands of ballots, that's what's not normal and what I want folks to understand.
And so can you give some lay of the land of what they're seeking to do and what their justification for trying to do it is?
Yeah, so groups like the Republican National Committee here in North Carolina and other battleground states engaged in a fair amount of pre-election litigation challenging ballots cast overseas by overseas citizens and military voters. So they're called UOCAVA ballots. They challenged those in pre-election litigation. They challenged registrations that where there might have been a piece of data missing in a voter's registration file, like a social security number or a driver's license number. The Help America Vote Act, which we've had for decades in this country, was about ensuring that those people still got their vote counted, even if there was a data issue, that they could show up with an ID, proof of residence, and vote. But the Republican National Committee, and now my opponent has taken the baton on this, are challenging registrations as being somehow incomplete and then jumping to the conclusion that they're invalid. So here in North Carolina, they're saying 60,000 voters are ineligible to be registered and voting. 2 of those are my parents. So I know a little bit about their experience. My father is a 30-year military veteran. He went to register and vote with his military ID, which doesn't have a social security number or obviously a driver's license number on it. It's a legitimate kind of identification, and it's a solid documentation. So they want people, families like mine, military families, to have their votes discounted. And for someone whose job it is to enforce the precious constitutional rights of North Carolina citizens, I want folks to know that the way we conduct ourselves after an election speaks to our decency and our entitlement to sit in that office. And the way I'm proceeding through these post-election processes is on my values, valuing the fundamental right to vote and defending those rights, even when it's politically challenging or politically less than desirable. I mean, that's who you should want on the bench. It's who North Carolina voters picked. They picked me.
Right. To watch the full reviews with Jon Favreau and Allison Riggs, click the thumbnails right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen to listen to the audio version of this episode, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.